So let's jump into this one. This is going to be just a sort of preemptive, like a pre-meeting trailer, a sizzle reel for a meeting. I just thought I'd make this so everyone can kind of watch it and understand what the topics will be. So that way, if when we do confab on this, which is I think we need to do, at least we can just kind of get into it knowing what we need to tackle. So these are some of the issues now that I've started to get into this. Some of the stuff I've uncovered, pun intended, once I was able to start getting into what actually is going to take to do this. So as you know, we were just going to be doing this here, changing it all out. These were the original kind of drawings we were working from to make this happen. And so this was based on some assumptions that, we have this 6-inch kick out that the logo sort of sits in, and, then we got these bars here and stuff. So once I started to look around, I'm like, I need some more information. So I kind of was digging in the crates and found the actual structural drawings for this. And after some serious head scratching and deciphering and trying to figure out, what is what and what view is what view, this thing's like 20 pages long. I was able to decipher the top area and what we actually have going on. Now, this gets us into the ballpark. Obviously, this is where, actual surveys will be great to confirm. But anyway, so like I say, we were going to go ahead and, be bolting the circle right to that and how we skin it and everything. So this changes all this. So just some overview. The issue is that the upper cabinet part that we want to attach our logo to is actually structurally a foot shorter than the actual rest of the frame. So this whole top part that we were assuming is actually 3 stacks, and the third stack is actually skinnier. And the whole 6-inch part that we were going to just be attaching to and bolting to and thinking, yeah, cool. That's actually a 6 inches back. And that's all completely rubbish, just dummied up, I guess. So I don't think that would be very prudent to try to attach this to, structure we don't even know anything about. So this is kind of where we're at, where the tan part here, the peach or whatever you will, Crayola flesh, is actually the 6 inches back part. Now, there are sometimes, there's give and take and compromises and stuff, and sometimes it actually works out for the better. Before, we were just trying to attach a 5-inch wide disc, like a big Frisbee, right to this and, structural and stuff. The purple here shows essentially where we can actually attach this thing to the framing. And it's kind of similar to what we had. But like the green and the purple here shows that like the green would be the extreme part on this side, the high end of the being able to attach it, and the low end here. But this actually gives us 6, maybe 7 inches, if you will, of structure we can build behind it. And then I can run runners up and actually give this some structure. So rather than, having how they had this where it's just attached to the framing and stuff. And then, so anyway, so that actually, and then the sign itself can maybe sit on this jutting out frame part here, and give it, give it support. So if anything, it's kind of shown how we can bolt this directly to the framing a lot easier, a lot better. But other stuff that is shown is like this mohawk, I'm calling it, is theoretically just bolted on and not really shown how it's, structural and whatnot. And just popping over here to Google Earth, from what I could see from different angles, doesn't look very structural. It's kind of bent. There's dents in it and stuff. So essentially what we're looking at is from here across to here is the 5'6" full frame that all of this is attached to. And then from here up is fake. So the actual tan part of this logo here is attached directly to the framing. That's the actual framing. So we're going to have to strip this part out. And then that's where it opens up the can of worms as far as how we end up skinning this. The original idea of skinning this was based on we could that this was all like this purple here and all the way to the green was all just, all the same size, all the same level, all the same everything. And we could take each of these pieces and just throw them up there and frap it down. Now they called in the structurals, they called 1/8 inch skin. Now, whether or not it's actual 1/8 inch skin or not, I'm not sure. But that 1/8 inch skin, the idea was that would stabilize these seams. So you could take a raw edge piece of metal, stick it up there, and you could shoot screws right into the 1/8 inch, and a piece of 1/8 inch behind this would be great. I mean, that would be nice and stable. So now that we have to actually take this all out, and we no longer have like this picture here, I don't really see where the seams are. There's definitely a seam here. And we know that on the structural, once this cabinet comes out, there's a good chance that this is going to be raw framing. And there's just a little bit of skin here and that's it. But trying to see if there's a seam here, I don't really see anything. And there's something, I'm using the block as a pointer here, not my finger, but like right there looks like something. But if we're going across here, I don't see a clear defined seam. So if we have to strip this back, if we take all of the aluminum down, then we are to bare studs. So much like a home renovation show that goes sideways mid-project, just like that, we start pulling stuff back, although it's more entertaining on TV than having to deal with it in real life. That kind of messes up how we're going to actually be able to attach our skins, because now we have, seams that are just floating in space and they'll never stabilize. So if we were to bite the bullet and start sheeting it on the framing, and now that's another thing, is we have to make sure that the framing is actually on the centers that they say it is. So they're saying that the framing is, where is that? It's way over here. Okay, so they're saying that the framing is essentially 43.5 on center from here. Now, there's the other discrepancy is, just bear with me, I'm kind of floating all over the place here. But like I say, these are all topics we'll talk about. We know that according to what looks here, this is indeed flush to the end. And this step that they've added on goes just to here. But the sketches confirm that this framing stops the 16 inches, the same as over here and the same as over here. And it's more of an audible that they called, that this actually sticks out flush. Because if we go back to our framing drawings here, this is the 5'6" framing, and this is the 4'6" framing we're dealing with. And you can see where they do have it built up on this side as well. And it's also called out here. This particular one shows the top of this cabinet and this cabinet. That's the Spa Resort Casino cabinet that we're going to be ripping out right here. This inset detail should follow here. So technically the framing stops here. So this all needs to be built out. And it makes sense, because if this followed the same, basically this is the 29-foot wide section that follows that framing all the way up, and it follows it here. So if this contour had followed up onto this cabinet, it would have had a little funkiness here, just like it had to deal with it there. So it makes sense that they called it, but that might just be also just sort of flushed out and not very structural. So when we go to do what we do, we're going to have to account for that, because according to the drawings, this is 29 feet and that's it. So the framing stops there, and then we need to dummy this out as well. So that also throws off our just slap skin on type of thing. So that's where we need to brainstorm on what to do, because this area represents the big cabinet coming out, the red cabinet, here. So we're going to be left with this sort of open area where we will see the studs. I'm going to send this to the back, so you'll see where the studs are. And if we were to, paint this thing with we had the 5x12 or 5x10 sheets here. We could 4x over that, and that was sort of the idea, is that would just, we would hit this skin and then continue over and we could just kind of block it or, live with it enough that we could get by. We could even put strips of 1/8 inch furring in there to try to buff it out, push it out a little bit, give it a little buffer. So the skinning part is what this becomes, because if we peel back the fakeness that's up here and it takes this skin with it, unless we can chop, and make our own seam and keep this skin, whether that's something we want to do. But according to what I can see in that picture there, oops, wrong one. You don't need to see the audio. Yeah, so right there, that seam does look like that's where the skin stops. So we can probably assume that this skin goes up that high, but I don't know if that's, all the way up, or if we can saw this flush and leave this skin, and then we can continue on with the idea we had with this. After we build out, I'm gonna have to build out that framing. Like I said, I'm gonna have to build all this out to make sure that, is flush with this framing. So that's added labor that we didn't see. And then we're going to have to, like I say, we'll have to dummy this out and bolt off of this and make that work to match what's there. So one of the brainstorms I had, maybe if we did have to basically forget all of the existing skin, just take it down to bare framing, then possibly we would be left with, what we would have to do at that point is sheet it on every vertical. So that ends up being like a 42 by 75, and we would just have to go 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way across, which is similar to what they're doing down here. You can see where each piece is hitting that, and that's a lot of work, a lot of screws. So trying to avoid that, where we can try to control things in the shop, I was thinking if we possibly could do, this is pure spitballing, but we did modular panels. So this would be a 1x2, 2 on the flat, 1 inch deep aluminum frame that we saw, cut, fab up, and then that would allow for this 45 by or 42 by 75 piece that would normally go there. We then break it up into 8 chunks versus, having to go along and sheet all the way along. So, because no matter how you slice it, pun intended, I mean, this is 75. So even if you try to go across this way, you have unstabilized seams. Whereas this would allow us to, I understand it would build this out another inch on both sides, but I don't think by the time you get down from here to here across this screen and stuff, I don't think anyone would notice that this is built out an extra inch on both sides. But what that would allow us to do is, so these would be 75 by 80 something, a little more manageable. And we could lords all this together and then just have modular panels of 090 on this frame. And we could bring them in, and then we just shoot through with self-tappers into the 3x3 angle and just work our way across. At which point we're dealing with only 8 panels. And at this point as well, we could do the longer panel on this side that allows us to then, we could tie off of a known thing and make it work, and try to, dummy up this end the way they kind of have it now. So anyway, so that's kind of the thing, is we have to deal with the skinning is the issue, is whether or not we try to Frankenstein off of an unknown, whether the skin goes all the way up here. And, once we start stripping back this fakeness to get to the framing for our circle, what happens to this? What's exposed? Now, this will be raw here. So sometimes the easier path is down and then come back up. So anyway, just so that, and so some of the stuff, so that's why I think it's easier to try to pick a path of forward progress and then do a survey against that, rather than go out there and do a blind survey and just try to take a bunch of measurements and pictures and just say, oh yeah, look at it. It's kind of like a sightseeing tourist trip of just, isn't that cool? Versus, okay, this is what we're going to try to do. Can we do it? So we need to make sure that these are truly on center, that these are truly 3 inch by quarter, 3x3. One of the discrepancies is the side profile view shows 4x4 square tubing. with the 3-inch frame. So the 3-inch frame is correct. And this shows 3-inch framing here, that's supposed to be 3-inch angle, this whole thing. This is supposed to be square tubing. However, it's supposed to be 2.5 by 2.5 by 3/16. And you can see where the 3x3 angle pokes out. They have it drawn correctly there versus they have it drawn for 4x4 here. That 4x4 is what's below. So I didn't even pay attention to that, but all the screen parts and stuff that has the main structure is built with 4x4. So I can see where, or at least it's spec'd to 4x4. So I could see where they just copy pasted up by accident here, but they're definitely calling out 2.5 by 2.5. And like I said, on the drawings for the lower part, this is 4x4. So I think they're correct on this, but they're not correct here. So confirmation that this is 2.5. And then confirmation that this is truly, 6 and 3 3/16 from the beginning of this to this. That's this frame. And then from here, which is where the cabinet starts, is 8 and 1/8 or plus minus 2'4". So the overall from here to here and the overall from here to here, because that allows us to know what we're going to do with our skin. And then whether or not, see, they have it drawn here as one piece. This is what kind of worries me, but of course they could do whatever they want. But they're showing the dummy part going from here. They have a seam here of that's where the skin seam is, going up and continuing, and then, all the way up. If that's the case, then we need to figure, can we maybe saw it there and continue to use the existing skin like we were doing to brace our new skin? Or do we bite the bullet and make modular panels that are 1 inch wider, and we go out there and screw them to, here and here, and then build it out? And that's kind of in our control at that point. We might have a little seam right here we have to deal with, but we could caulk it or whatever. And, and then work from there. So another thing we need to sort of, I'd like to have some confirmation is they don't clarify where the upper part of this, so these frame pieces here are 3x3 supposedly, and they terminate here onto this part. Now I just kind of slid that down. This is the way it's drawn. It just terminates. Okay, great. So if that terminates against this frame here, so this is the 4'6" frame, the smaller frame that sits on top. Sure, you can weld this part to that, and that's kind of what they have that shown there. Where? Here. Yeah, so they have that shown there. But as you go down this way, there isn't any sort of showing how this is actually attached along here, whether there's another piece of angle all the way along that sits on top of all this, because they're calling this square tubing, but they're calling this angle. So depending on which way this angle's facing, if it's facing up or down, then if you run a piece of angle along here, so these are the struts for the 4x6 and these are the struts for the 5x6. So technically these are ending in space, just hanging there. We know that's not the case. So that would be this drawing here. So like I say, these are 6 inches back from these. So we need to understand if there is, I drew it here, but there should be another piece of 3x3 running across here, but it's not drawn that way. It would be helpful to know, because we could even use it for bracing on this circle here. If we know that there's a chunk running along here, what it's made out of, if it's tubular steel, like I say, this is rolled 3x3 by quarter angle. This should also then be 3x3 by quarter angle. And all of this is 3x3/4 angle. Confirmation though, we need to know that this is 3x3. We need to know if these are indeed, as they say, on center. So because when we go to put this up, we're going to have to make sure we hit these. So if these are off in any way, it could be bad news for that. And then also we're going to need to, make these cabinets. Just spitballing there, I'm thinking I would like to make this cabinet about 1 inch in, just to give it some breathing room. Just so that way we don't have to be exact, because this will have to be kind of sitting out. Maybe even bring this out a 1/2 inch. like that. So that way, or even in, maybe we can just do a full inch. So that way, it sort of floats, and that way there's no conflict there. And then, like I say, I'd inline this an inch or so to make sure we're missing that. I don't think anyone will notice. So, but basically how we proceed with skinning this, how far do we take it down? All that. And our surveys will now have to be based on what we're going to do and what can we do and what's the best way moving forward, whether we do like a modular panel system across and create our own framing. Because we want these letters to be mounted onto something, relatively beefy. I was confident that with a sandwich of 1/8 attached to the framing, along with our 080 solution on top, these would have plenty to chew into. But if we strip back all of this and we're down to raw framing and just try to put the 080 on there with unstabilized seams, then I'm starting to get a little worried about these being all mounted to that. So that's where maybe a modular framing system screwed to the frames themselves, and again, we would have to make sure that these frames are on center, because we would be splitting this seam right down the middle, and we'd have 1.5 inches and 1.5 inches, and we don't want to get off as we go. And then, we're not on the seam there, because the idea will be to shoot screws right in there and have these things on there. Very nice. And then, skinning this in 04 or in 090 will then give us something very nice for these to be attached to, going forward. So anyway, like to schedule a meeting for this to see exactly what we want to do. So anyway, that's it.